Have you ever felt small in the face of a challenge that seemed impossible to overcome? Like the world was against you, and all that was left was to watch? The story of David and Goliath teaches us that sometimes it's not brute strength or the enemy's grandeur that defines the outcome, but rather the courage and faith we carry within us. Goliath was a giant, both in size and reputation, but he underestimated the strength of a young shepherd, driven by confidence in something greater than himself. But here's the surprising point. What if I told you that facing your Goliaths might be the key to unlocking the life you've always wanted? It may sound counterintuitive, but the greatest obstacles often conceal the greatest opportunities. However, what many overlook is that preparation for this battle begins long before the confrontation. Do you want to discover how to turn what seems impossible into an epic victory? Stay with me, and you'll understand what it truly means to defeat giants and how it can change your story. Goliath, the Philistine warrior, was a true force of nature, both in size and presence. Standing over 3 meters tall, he towered over any man on the field, paralyzing the army of Israel with fear. Imagine facing an opponent who, just by seeing him, drained all the courage from the warriors around him. His figure was imposing, dressed in armor that seemed impenetrable, reflecting the power he represented. It was no wonder he had become a symbol of fear, a giant whose shadow extended over the battlefield. That battlefield was not just a physical place, but also a space for emotional and spiritual confrontations. Goliath didn't need to raise a weapon to intimidate. His presence was a strategy in itself. Every day he taunted the Israelites, knowing that even without fighting, the terror he caused already made him victorious in many hearts. This is where we can reflect. How many times in life do we face giants that seem invincible? But in truth, our biggest battle is internal. What's interesting is that behind all that spectacle of strength, there was a gap. Goliath, despite all his grandeur, was not invulnerable. The image of invincibility he projected on the battlefield had its flaws. Here's the important lesson. The size of the challenge does not determine defeat. Sometimes the weakness lies exactly where we least expect it. And this is where the story begins to take an interesting turn, connecting to the next character in this tale. Goliath's armor and challenge. Goliath was not just large in size, but his armor was almost as impressive as he was. Imagine a warrior completely shielded, covered from head to toe with bronze armor, weighing over 50 kilograms. This alone would deter any adversary brave enough to try to face him. The spear he wielded had a tip as heavy as a bowling ball. To top it off, he had a shield bearer accompanying him, reinforcing his already incredible defense. Goliath was a human tank, impenetrable. Goliath's strategy was clear and straightforward. Every day he challenged Israel, asking them to send a single man to fight him. It was a representative combat, where the winner not only won the battle, but determined the fate of all his compatriots. For 40 days he provoked the army of Israel, challenging them to find someone brave enough to face him in a deadly duel. And with each passing day without a response, his psychological power grew. Goliath understood that victory is often won before a sword is even lifted. This challenge posed by Goliath resonates today in many life situations. How many times do we face challenges that seem to repeat themselves incessantly, testing our resilience, our faith, and our determination? Just as Goliath challenged Israel, we too face our giants daily, waiting for the moment when we decide to act. And it's precisely when it seems that the giant will prevail that an unlikely hero emerges. But that's the next part of the story. This challenge posed by Goliath resonates today in many life situations. How many times do we face challenges that seem to repeat themselves incessantly, testing our resilience, our faith, and our determination? Just as Goliath challenged Israel, we too face our giants daily, waiting for the moment when we decide to act. And it's precisely when it seems that the giant will prevail that an unlikely hero emerges. But that's the next part of the story. David's background. David was just a young shepherd, someone who, in society's eyes, didn't seem to have much to offer in terms of strength or military experience. He wasn't on the battlefield to fight, but rather to fulfill a simple task: bring food to his brothers who served in Saul's army. While the other soldiers trembled in fear at the sound of Goliath's taunts, David was more concerned with his sheep and his family's well-being. The simplicity of his life as a shepherd, however, concealed a strength and courage that even he had not fully tested yet. What makes David such a fascinating figure is that, despite being young and inexperienced in battle, he had already faced powerful challenges. While caring for his sheep, he fought lions and bears, and in each of these confrontations, his faith and skills were forged. It's interesting to think that while others saw David as just a boy, he already carried with him a story of courage that prepared him for something much greater. The lesson here is clear. The challenges we face in our daily lives, however small they may seem, can prepare us to face giants in the future. When David heard Goliath insulting the army of Israel, something inside him ignited. It wasn't just the desire to protect his nation, but the indignation of seeing a giant blaspheme against the God of Israel. It is this fire, this combination of unwavering faith and the experience of overcoming obstacles, that propelled David to make a decision that would change everything. He did not hesitate to offer his own life to face the giant, and this choice set the following events in motion in a spectacular way. David's courage. David, without hesitation, volunteered to face the giant, something no one else had the courage to do. It wasn't physical strength or military training that drove him, but his unwavering faith in God, while all the warriors around him focused on the size and strength of Goliath. David focused on something greater, divine justice and the belief that he was not alone in this battle. He was certain that, just as God had protected him from the lion and the bear, he would also protect him from that giant. When he presented himself to King Saul, David heard words of discouragement. Saul, like others, saw only a young boy without armor, without a sword, without the profile of a hero. However, David maintained his confidence. To him, the experience of fighting predators in the field was already proof that he was prepared for this mission. Here we learn that often, the people around us may not see our potential, but the true value comes from how we see ourselves and the faith we carry in our own abilities in something greater. The scene was set. On one side, Goliath, a giant heavily armed and confident. On the other, David, with nothing but his sling, 5 stones, and unshakable faith. The battlefield was silent, everyone watching what seemed to be an unequal, almost cruel fight. Goliath laughed and insulted David, certain that the young boy would be an easy opponent. But as so often happens, the true strength of a warrior isn't in his armor or his sword, but in his heart and determination. David was not intimidated by Goliath's taunts. He moved quickly, running toward the giant, something few expected. The sling, a simple but deadly tool in the right hands, was launched with precision. The stone struck Goliath in a vulnerable spot, the forehead, where his armor did not protect him. The impact was immediate and devastating. The giant fell to the ground, surprising everyone watching, and in a moment that seemed unlikely, the young shepherd defeated the feared warrior. Goliath's fall echoed not only on the battlefield, but in the history of Israel. What happened next was swift and decisive. David ran to Goliath's fallen body, took his sword, and with a single blow, decapitated the giant. The battle was over. The moral of the story is not just about physical victory, but about the courage to face the impossible with the resources we have at hand. David showed us that sometimes we don't need something grand to defeat our giants, just firm faith, a good strategy, and the courage to act. And thus, the next great moment of the story was about to happen. David, now a hero in the eyes of the people, not only killed Goliath, but also brought his head as a trophy to Jerusalem. This act symbolized not only the physical victory, but also the spiritual and moral defeat of the enemy. The image of a young shepherd triumphing over a giant warrior echoed throughout Israel, marking the beginning of a new era. This event also cemented the respect and admiration that the people began to have for David, preparing him for the destiny that awaited him. After all, this victory was just the beginning of something much greater. The consequences of this battle were profound, as they not only defined a military victory, but also shaped David's destiny. He went from being a simple shepherd to becoming the hero of a nation, a rising leader who would soon be recognized by all. However, despite the glory, the true weight of this victory was yet to be felt, as David's story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold into something even grander. Biblical and historical insights. The story of David and Goliath is not just a narrative about a young man defeating a giant, but is deeply rooted in biblical and historical concepts that have shaped generations' understanding. Goliath and his lineage, the Nephilim, represent more than just physical enemies of Israel. To many scholars and theologians, Goliath symbolizes a spiritual obstacle, a personification of forces opposing the divine will. The scriptures mention the Nephilim as beings of great stature and power, a race of giants whose origins are shrouded in mystery and who appeared at key moments in the history of God's people. This victory also opens the door to deeper reflections on the nature of power and leadership. David, with his simplicity and unshakable faith, proved that true strength does not lie in numbers or armor, but in unwavering belief in something greater. The story of Goliath and his brothers, all descendants of this lineage of giants, reminds us that, regardless of the size of the challenge, those who trust in their divine mission will always find a way to triumph. But the impact of this victory extends far beyond the battlefield.